On a cold December morning in 1973, Dr. Emily Brock drove away from her clinic in Stockholm and simply vanished. For 21 years, her family searched desperately for answers. Police found no clues. Friends had no explanations. Then, in 1994, divers made a discovery so shocking that even experienced investigators couldn't believe what they saw. What they found underwater would change everything we thought we knew about Emily's disappearance. But the truth was far more disturbing than anyone imagined. Dr. Emily Brock was not just any physician. At 34, she had built a reputation as city's most caring family doctor. Her clinic in central Stockholm buzzed with patients who traveled from across the city just to see her. Children smiled when Emily walked into the room. Adults trusted her completely. She worked long hours, often staying late to comfort worried families. Emily never turned away a patient regardless of their ability to pay. Her colleagues respected her medical knowledge, but it was her kindness that made her truly special. Everyone who knew Emily described her the same way: gentle, dedicated, and reliable. She had never missed a day of work without calling ahead. Emily lived alone in a small apartment near her clinic, spending most evenings reading medical journals or visiting elderly patients who couldn't travel. Her predictable routine made what happened next even more puzzling. December 15, 1973 started like any other Friday for Emily. She arrived at her clinic at 7 in the morning, greeting her nurse, Astrid Lindgren, with her usual warm smile. The appointment schedule was packed, but Emily moved through her patients with practiced ease. She examined sick children, counseled worried parents, and renewed prescriptions for elderly regulars. Around 3 in the afternoon, Emily told Astrid she needed to make a quick house call. She grabbed her medical bag and car keys, mentioning she would return within an hour to finish paperwork. Astrid watched from the window as Emily climbed into her light blue Volvo 142 and drove north toward the residential district. That brief conversation would haunt Astrid for decades. Emily's voice had sounded normal, perhaps slightly hurried, but nothing seemed wrong. The clinic waited. Patients arrived for late appointments, but Dr. Emily Brock never returned. When Emily failed to return by closing time, Astrid felt a knot forming in her stomach. Emily was never late, never forgot appointments, never left patients waiting. Astrid called Emily's apartment repeatedly, but the phone rang endlessly. She drove to Emily's building and knocked on her door until neighbors complained. No answer. By 9 o'clock that evening, Astrid contacted Emily's only known relative, her elderly aunt Margareta, who lived in Gothenburg. Margareta hadn't heard from Emily in weeks, which was unusual since Emily called her every Sunday without fail. The aunt immediately drove to Stockholm, arriving near midnight. Together, Astrid and Margareta searched Emily's apartment using a spare key. Everything appeared normal. Emily's bed was made, her clothes hung neatly in the closet, and her medical books sat organized on their shelves. But something felt wrong. The apartment was too perfect, too untouched, as if Emily had never intended to return home that night. Saturday morning brought no answers. Margareta filed a missing person report with Stockholm police, but the officer seemed unconcerned. Adults disappeared all the time, he explained, usually returning within a few days. But Emily's friends knew better. They organized search parties, distributing flyers throughout the city. Emily's face smiled from every lamppost and shop window. Local newspapers picked up the story, running headlines about the beloved doctor's disappearance. Tips poured in from across Sweden. Someone claimed to see Emily at a train station in Malmö. Another caller insisted she was boarding a ferry to Finland. Each lead proved false. Meanwhile, investigators began piecing together Emily's final day. The house call she mentioned to Astrid became their primary focus. But here's where the story took its first strange turn. No patient had requested a visit that afternoon. Emily's appointment book showed no scheduled house calls. Her regular patients were all accounted for, and none had contacted the clinic requesting emergency care. As police dug deeper into Emily's life, they discovered their perfect doctor was hiding secrets. Bank records revealed Emily had withdrawn large sums of cash over the previous months, depleting her savings account. Her landlord mentioned she had asked about breaking her lease early, though she never followed through. Most puzzling were the mysterious phone calls. Several neighbors reported hearing Emily's phone ring at odd hours throughout November and early December. The calls came late at night or very early in the morning, always brief. Emily would answer quickly, speaking in hushed tones that carried through her thin apartment walls. When neighbors asked about the calls, Emily deflected their questions with nervous laughter. She claimed they were medical emergencies, but something in her manner suggested otherwise. Her once cheerful demeanor had grown strained in the weeks before her disappearance. Colleagues noticed Emily seemed distracted, frequently checking her watch and jumping whenever the clinic phone rang. With each passing day, Emily's disappearance became Sweden's most talked-about mystery. Police expanded their investigation beyond Stockholm, checking hospitals, morgues, and hotels throughout Scandinavia. They questioned Emily's patients, colleagues, and the few people she considered friends. Everyone painted the same picture. Emily was responsible, caring, and absolutely not the type to abandon her life without explanation. The Volvo 142 became the key focus. Police issued nationwide alerts for the light blue sedan with registration number EMB 731. Gas stations, toll booths, and parking attendants received Emily's photo and car description. Border guards watched for the vehicle at crossings to Norway, Denmark, and Finland. Yet the car remained invisible, as if it had simply vanished along with its driver. Television news programs featured Emily's story weekly, keeping public interest alive. Psychics called police claiming visions of Emily trapped in various locations, but searches found nothing. Private investigators volunteered their services pro bono, but even they made no progress. By spring 1974, three main theories dominated discussions about Emily's fate. The first suggested she had suffered some kind of mental breakdown and fled to start a new life elsewhere. Supporters pointed to her mysterious phone calls and unusual behavior in the weeks before her disappearance. They believed Emily had carefully planned her exit, withdrawing cash and preparing to abandon her medical practice. The second theory was darker. Someone had kidnapped or murdered Emily. Her predictable routines made her an easy target, and the fake house call suggested she had been lured into a trap. The third possibility seemed most unlikely but couldn't be dismissed. Emily had killed herself. Some investigators wondered if the beloved doctor was struggling with depression or facing some terrible secret that drove her to desperate measures. Each theory had supporters among police, journalists, and the public. But as months passed without evidence supporting any explanation, Emily's case began to fade from headlines. The official investigation continued, but with decreasing intensity and hope. Years passed, and Stockholm slowly forgot about Dr. Emily Brock. The clinic where she worked hired a replacement physician who gradually won over Emily's former patients. Astrid, the nurse, eventually retired, but never stopped wondering about her colleagues' fate. Aunt Margareta kept Emily's apartment exactly as it was for 3 years before finally packing away her belongings. She placed Emily's medical diploma, photographs, and personal items in storage, unable to throw them away, but unwilling to display constant reminders of her loss. The light blue Volvo was reported stolen from the police database after 7 years of fruitless searching. Insurance companies declared Emily legally dead after the standard waiting period, though no body had ever been found. Her medical license was revoked for abandonment of practice. Gradually, Emily Brock transformed from a missing person into a cold case file gathering dust in police archives. But her story lived on in whispered conversations among those who remembered the doctor who had simply vanished without a trace. On a humid July morning in 1994, recreational diver Lars Eriksson prepared for what should have been a routine dive in Lake Mälaren, about 40 kilometers west of Stockholm. Lars belonged to a diving club that explored Sweden's many lakes during summer months, documenting underwater geology and photographing fish habitats. He had dived this particular section of Mälaren dozens of times over the years, finding it peaceful but unremarkable. The water was typically murky, with visibility limited to just a few meters in most spots. That morning, Lars descended to his usual depth of 15 meters, following the lake's sloping bottom toward deeper water. He was collecting samples of aquatic plant life when his flashlight beam caught something metallic glinting in the sediment. Curious, Lars swam closer and brushed away decades of accumulated mud and algae. What he uncovered made him question his own eyes. Partially buried in the lake bottom sat the rusted remains of a car, its distinctive shape still recognizable despite 2 decades underwater. Lars Eriksson's hands trembled as he cleared more mud from the submerged vehicle. Even through the murky water and layers of rust, he could make out the unmistakable profile of a Volvo sedan from the 1970s. The car sat upright on the lake bottom, as if someone had carefully driven it into the water and parked it there. Aquatic plants had grown through the broken windows, and fish darted in and out of the interior. Lars's excitement quickly turned to unease as he realized he might be looking at evidence of a crime. He photographed the car from multiple angles with his underwater camera, then surfaced to mark the location with a floating buoy. Back on shore, Lars immediately contacted local police, explaining his discovery with barely contained excitement. The dispatcher seemed skeptical at first, but Lars's detailed description and diving credentials convinced her to send investigators. Within hours, police boats surrounded the marked location, and specialized dive teams prepared to examine what would become Sweden's most significant underwater archaeological discovery in decades. Police divers confirmed Lars's discovery within minutes of entering the water. The submerged vehicle was indeed a Volvo 142, and despite significant corrosion, portions of the license plate remained readable: EMB 731. After 21 years of questions and theories, Emily Brock's missing car had been found. The discovery sent shockwaves through Swedish law enforcement. Detective Inspector Gunnar Holmberg, who had worked Emily's original case as a junior officer, was called in to oversee the investigation. Now nearing retirement, Holmberg remembered every detail of the frustrated search from decades earlier. He stood on the police boat, staring down at the water where Emily's car rested, feeling a mixture of vindication and dread. The location made no sense. Lake Mälaren was nowhere near Emily's planned route for any known house call. The lake sat in the opposite direction from her clinic and apartment, accessible only by several kilometers of rural roads that Emily had no reason to travel. Extracting a car from 15 meters of water required careful planning and specialized equipment. Police contracted a marine salvage company experienced in underwater recoveries, knowing that any evidence inside the vehicle had to be preserved. The operation took 3 days to complete, with divers carefully attaching lifting cables to the Volvo's frame without disturbing the interior. Crowds of onlookers gathered along the shoreline, including many retired police officers who had worked Emily's original case. Local news crews set up cameras to broadcast the historic moment live across Sweden. When the Volvo finally broke the water's surface, gasps rippled through the watching crowd. The car had maintained its basic shape, but 21 years underwater had transformed it into a ghostly artifact. Rust covered every surface, windows were either missing or spiderwebbed with cracks, and aquatic vegetation draped from the door frames like funeral shrouds. As water poured from the interior, investigators prepared for what they might find inside the remarkably preserved time capsule. With the Volvo secured on dry land, forensic specialists began their careful examination. The car's interior had been remarkably protected from the elements by its submersion in the lake's oxygen-poor depths. Emily's medical bag sat on the passenger seat, its leather cracked but contents intact. Prescription bottles, medical instruments, and patient files had survived in plastic protection. The glove compartment yielded Emily's registration papers, insurance documents, and a small notebook filled with patient appointments. But it was what investigators didn't find that proved most significant. There was no sign of Emily Brock herself. No bones, no clothing, no personal effects beyond what would normally remain in her car. The driver's seat showed no evidence of struggle or violence. Everything appeared as if Emily had simply parked the car, stepped out, and walked away. This absence of human remains created more questions than answers. How had the car ended up in the lake without Emily inside it? The discovery that everyone hoped would solve the mystery instead deepened it considerably. Advanced forensic analysis revealed crucial details about the car's underwater journey. Microscopic examination of paint samples and metal corrosion patterns suggested the Volvo had been submerged gradually, not driven off a cliff or pushed from a bridge. Water had entered through open windows and doors, allowing the car to sink slowly and settle gently on the lake bottom. Most significantly, forensic botanists studying plant growth patterns inside the vehicle estimated it had been underwater since winter 1973 or early 1974, perfectly matching Emily's disappearance timeline. The car's engine showed no signs of damage or malfunction, ruling out mechanical failure as a cause for Emily stopping at the lake. Investigators found no suicide note, no evidence of foul play, and no indication that Emily had been forced to drive to this remote location. The car's fuel tank was nearly empty, suggesting Emily had driven a considerable distance before the vehicle ended up in the water. But perhaps most puzzling was the car's position on the lake bottom, perfectly aligned as if someone had carefully guided it into the water rather than abandoning it carelessly. News of the car's discovery prompted an unexpected development. Eric Sundberg, now 73 years old and living in a retirement home near the lake, contacted police with information he had kept secret for over 2 decades. In December 1973, Eric had been a 49-year-old forestry worker who often walked along Lake Malaren's shores during his lunch breaks. On December 15th, the same day Emily disappeared, Eric claimed to have seen something unusual while eating his sandwich near the water's edge. A woman matching Emily's description had been standing knee-deep in the lake's frigid water, fully clothed, staring out toward the deeper sections. Eric initially assumed she was a nature enthusiast, or perhaps someone disposing of unwanted items, though the freezing temperature made her behavior seem odd. When he looked again a few minutes later, the woman was gone. Eric admitted he should have reported the sighting when Emily's disappearance became news, but he hadn't connected the two events until seeing television coverage of the car's recovery. Eric Sundberg's testimony provided investigators with their first concrete sighting of Emily after she left her clinic. If his memory was accurate, Emily had reached Lake Melaren by mid-afternoon on December 15th, roughly 2 hours after telling her nurse about a house call. But significant gaps remained in reconstructing Emily's final hours. How had she traveled from central Stockholm to this remote lake 40 kilometers away? Why had she chosen this specific location? Most importantly, if Eric saw her standing in the water alive, what happened to Emily after her car was submerged? Police retraced possible routes from Emily's clinic to the lake, looking for gas stations, shops, or other locations where she might have stopped. They found nothing. No security cameras from 1973 still existed, and no other witnesses came forward despite renewed media appeals. The timeline suggested Emily had driven directly to Lake Malaren, but her motivation remained completely mysterious. Detective Holmberg began to suspect that Emily's disappearance was far more complex than anyone had imagined. Research into Lake Malaren's past revealed disturbing patterns that made investigators reconsider Emily's case. Local historians discovered that the lake had been a site of unexplained disappearances and suicides throughout the 20th century. At least 6 people had vanished near its shores between 1950 and 1973. Their bodies never recovered despite extensive searches. 3 of these cases involved individuals who, like Emily, had left behind cars but no physical remains. Old newspaper archives contained reports of strange lights seen over the lake at night, unusual animal behavior, and folklore about the water's supernatural properties. While investigators dismissed supernatural explanations, the statistical pattern was undeniable. Lake Melleran attracted people in crisis, and many never left alive. Some local residents whispered about the lake's calling effect, claiming it drew troubled souls to its depths. Mental health professionals theorized that isolated bodies of water often became sites of self-destruction for people seeking peaceful endings to their suffering. But Emily showed no signs of mental distress, making her case distinct from the others. Determined to understand Emily's mental state before her disappearance, investigators obtained permission to examine her personal medical records. What they discovered challenged everything they thought they knew about the beloved doctor. Emily had been secretly treating herself for severe anxiety and depression, prescribing medications that she carefully concealed from colleagues and patients. Her private notes revealed months of escalating psychological distress, including panic attacks, insomnia, and what she described as overwhelming feelings of hopelessness. Most shocking was Emily's own diagnosis of herself with what would now be recognized as clinical depression with suicidal ideation. She had documented her declining mental health with clinical precision, noting symptoms and medication effects as if she were studying her own case from a professional distance. The records painted a portrait of a woman desperately trying to maintain her caring facade while battling internal demons. Emily's perfect exterior had hidden a private struggle that none of her patients or colleagues suspected. Emily's medical records also contained clues about the mysterious late-night phone calls that had puzzled her neighbors. She had been secretly consulting with a psychiatrist in Gothenburg, Dr. Henrik Larsson, who specialized in treating medical professionals suffering from depression and burnout. The calls occurred during Dr. Larsson's private consultation hours, when Emily felt safe discussing her deteriorating mental state without fear of discovery. Dr. Larsson, now retired, confirmed that Emily had been his patient for 4 months before her disappearance. He described her as intelligent, articulate, and deeply ashamed of her condition. Emily feared that seeking help would destroy her medical career and disappoint her patients who depended on her strength. She had refused his suggestions for hospitalization or public treatment, insisting on handling her crisis privately. In their final conversation, 3 days before Emily disappeared, Dr. Larsson noted that she seemed calmer, but spoke about feeling ready to let go of the burden. He had planned to call Emily the following week, but learned of her disappearance from news reports. Bank investigators provided additional pieces to Emily's psychological puzzle. The large cash withdrawals that had initially suggested flight or kidnapping now revealed a different pattern entirely. Emily had been systematically converting her assets to cash, not to fund an escape, but to settle her earthly affairs. She had paid several months of rent in advance, settled all outstanding bills, and even prepaid her apartment's utilities. The pattern resembled someone preparing for a permanent departure rather than planning a new life elsewhere. Emily had also made anonymous donations to several Stockholm charities, giving away thousands of kroner to organizations serving children and elderly patients. Most tellingly, she had withdrawn enough cash to cover her own funeral expenses, leaving the money hidden in her apartment with a note designating it for final arrangements. This meticulous financial planning suggested Emily had been contemplating suicide for weeks, possibly months, before her disappearance. Her actions revealed a methodical mind organizing for an ending she believed was inevitable. Among Emily's possessions, investigators discovered a sealed envelope addressed to her Aunt Margareta, hidden inside a medical textbook. The letter, dated December 10th, provided Emily's own explanation for what was about to happen. In careful handwriting, she confessed her months of suffering with depression and apologized for the pain her decision would cause others. Emily wrote about feeling like a fraud, pretending to heal others while unable to help herself. She described her work as the only thing keeping her alive, but admitted that even caring for patients had become overwhelming. The letter revealed Emily's plan to end her life in a way that would spare others from discovering her body, which she believed would be traumatic for those who loved her. She specifically mentioned choosing Lake Melleran because of its depth and peaceful setting, hoping her remains would never be found. Emily's final words expressed gratitude for the love she had received and regret for the sorrow her actions would cause. The letter was signed but never mailed, perhaps representing Emily's final moment of doubt. With Emily's letter providing context, investigators could finally reconstruct her last day with accuracy. After leaving her clinic on December 15th, Emily had driven directly to Lake Melleran, following a route she had likely scouted during previous weeks. The fake house call had been her way of leaving work without arousing immediate suspicion, buying precious hours before anyone would search for her. She had parked her car near the lake's edge and, according to Eric Sundberg's testimony, waded into the freezing water fully clothed. Emily's medical knowledge would have informed her that hypothermia in December water would cause unconsciousness within minutes, making her chosen method relatively quick and painless. The mystery of how her car ended up underwater was solved by understanding Emily's final act of consideration for others. Before entering the water, she had released the car's brake and allowed it to roll slowly into the lake, ensuring that her body and vehicle would disappear together. This final gesture demonstrated Emily's desire to spare others the trauma of discovering her remains. Emily's careful planning explained why extensive searches had found no trace of her for 21 years. Lake Melleran reaches depths of over 60 meters in some areas, and Emily had chosen a location where the bottom dropped off sharply just beyond where her car was found. Her body would have been carried by underwater currents into the deepest sections of the lake, where the cold, oxygen-poor water could preserve remains indefinitely. The search teams in 1973 had focused on land areas and shallow water near shores, never imagining that Emily had traveled so far from Stockholm, or that she might have deliberately concealed both herself and her car in the lake's depths. Modern sonar equipment could potentially locate Emily's remains, but after more than 2 decades, investigators decided against further searches. Emily had achieved her goal of disappearing completely, and disturbing her final resting place seemed unnecessary given what was now known about her intentions. The lake had kept her secret exactly as she had planned. As investigators prepared to close Emily's case, one more discovery emerged from her apartment. Aunt Margareta, cleaning out Emily's remaining possessions, found a second letter wedged behind a dresser drawer. This letter, addressed to Emily's patients, was dated the same day as her disappearance. In it, Emily apologized for abandoning her medical practice and expressed hope that her patients would understand her decision. She wrote about the privilege of serving as their doctor and thanked them for trusting her with their health and their stories. Emily specifically mentioned several elderly patients by name, asking future caregivers to pay special attention to their needs. The letter revealed Emily's deep sense of responsibility toward those she served, making her decision to leave them behind even more heartbreaking. She concluded by encouraging her patients to continue seeking medical care and to remember that healing comes from within as much as from medicine. This final message to those she had devoted her career to serving provided insight into the conflict between Emily's professional dedication and personal despair. Dr. Magnus Peterson, who had worked alongside Emily at a neighboring clinic, came forward after news of the letters became public. He revealed that Emily had approached him 3 weeks before her disappearance, asking hypothetical questions about physician suicide and depression within the medical community. At the time, Dr. Peterson had dismissed her questions as academic curiosity, perhaps related to a research project or patient case. Looking back, he realized Emily had been reaching out for help in the only way she felt safe. Dr. Peterson blamed himself for not recognizing the signs, explaining that medical professionals often hide their struggles from colleagues who might judge them as weak or unfit to practice. He described a culture within medicine that demanded perfection and discouraged doctors from admitting their own vulnerabilities. Emily's death sparked conversations about mental health support for healthcare workers, leading to new programs designed to help doctors seek treatment without fear of career consequences. Dr. Peterson spent his remaining years advocating for physician mental health awareness, ensuring that Emily's struggle would prevent similar tragedies. Among the most poignant responses to Emily's story came from Maria Olson, who had been 8 years old during her final visit to Emily's clinic. Maria remembered Emily as the kind doctor who made her laugh during vaccination appointments and always carried candy in her coat pocket. Decades later, as an adult with children of her own, Maria was devastated to learn about Emily's secret suffering. She wrote to newspapers describing how Emily's warmth and compassion had shaped her own approach to parenting and her career choice to become a teacher. Maria's letter was one of hundreds from former patients who shared similar memories of Emily's kindness. These testimonials revealed the profound impact Emily had made on countless lives, making her private struggle even more tragic. Many patients wrote about how Emily's care had gotten them through difficult times, never suspecting that their beloved doctor was fighting her own battle. The outpouring of gratitude demonstrated that Emily's legacy lived on in the lives she had touched, even though she had been unable to save herself. Astrid Lindgren, Emily's former nurse, finally broke her decades-long silence about the warning signs she had noticed, but failed to understand. In interviews following the case's resolution, Astrid described subtle changes in Emily's behavior during the months before her disappearance. Emily had begun arriving at work earlier and staying later, as if avoiding time alone at home. She had started taking on additional patient loads, accepting more house calls and emergency appointments than ever before. Astrid now recognized these behaviors as Emily's attempt to distract herself from depression through constant work. Most painfully, Astrid remembered Emily's increased physical affection with patients, hugging children longer, and holding elderly patients' hands during routine examinations. These gestures, which Astrid had attributed to Emily's caring nature, now seemed like someone saying goodbye. Astrid's testimony helped mental health professionals understand how depression can manifest in high-functioning individuals who maintain their professional responsibilities while privately planning their deaths. Her insights contributed to training programs for healthcare workers to recognize depression in colleagues. Aunt Margareta, now in her 80s, provided the most powerful response to learning the truth about Emily's disappearance. Despite decades of worry and unanswered questions, Margareta expressed forgiveness and understanding for her niece's decision. She explained that Emily had always been sensitive and perfectionist, qualities that made her an excellent doctor, but also vulnerable to overwhelming pressure. Margareta revealed that Emily's parents, both deceased by 1973, had also struggled with depression, suggesting a possible genetic component to Emily's condition. She described Emily's childhood as happy, but marked by intense academic pressure and a need to please everyone around her. Margareta wished Emily had felt safe enough to ask for help, but she understood the stigma surrounding mental health in the 1970s, especially for medical professionals. Her public statements about Emily's death helped reduce shame surrounding physician suicide and encouraged other families to discuss mental health openly. Margareta established a scholarship fund in Emily's name to support medical students studying psychiatry and mental health treatment. Lake Malaren's reputation changed dramatically following Emily's case. Local authorities installed mental health crisis phones along popular walking paths and increased patrol presence during evening hours. Mental health organizations began using Emily's story to educate the public about depression symptoms and the importance of seeking help. The lake, once known primarily for recreation and natural beauty, became a symbol of hidden struggles and the need for community awareness. Ironically, Emily's careful choice of a peaceful final location led to its transformation into a place of hope and intervention. Suicide prevention advocates held annual memorial walks around the lake, combining remembrance of Emily with education about mental health resources. The contrast between the lake's serene appearance and the tragedies it had witnessed became a powerful metaphor for the hidden nature of depression and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. Emily's story helped save lives by encouraging others to recognize warning signs and seek help before reaching crisis points. Detective Inspector Gunnar Holmberg officially closed Emily Brock's case in late 1994, more than 21 years after it began. The final report concluded that Emily had died by suicide on December 15, 1973, after months of untreated depression. Holmberg, who had devoted significant portions of his career to solving Emily's disappearance, expressed mixed emotions about the case's resolution. While he felt satisfied to finally provide answers to Emily's family and the public, he remained saddened by the tragedy of a brilliant doctor who couldn't heal herself. The case became a landmark in Swedish criminal investigation, demonstrating how mental health issues could complicate missing person cases and highlighting the need for better understanding of suicide patterns. Holmberg used Emily's case in training programs for new detectives, teaching them to look beyond obvious explanations and consider psychological factors in mysterious disappearances. His methodical approach and refusal to give up on the case became legendary within Swedish law enforcement, inspiring other officers to persist with difficult investigations. Emily's death prompted significant changes within Sweden's medical community regarding physician mental health and suicide prevention. Medical schools began incorporating mental health awareness into their curricula, teaching future doctors to recognize depression symptoms in themselves and colleagues. Professional medical associations established confidential counseling services specifically for healthcare workers, allowing doctors to seek help without fear of career consequences. Emily's case became a catalyst for research into physician suicide rates, revealing that doctors died by suicide at rates significantly higher than the general population. This research led to systemic changes in medical training, reducing work-hour requirements and implementing wellness programs designed to prevent burnout and depression. Medical conferences began featuring sessions on physician mental health, breaking decades of silence around the topic. Emily's legacy helped create a culture where seeking mental health treatment was viewed as responsible self-care rather than professional weakness. The changes inspired by her tragedy potentially saved countless lives within the medical profession. Swedish media coverage of Emily's case sparked national conversations about mental health stigma and the pressures faced by healthcare professionals. Editorial writers praised Emily's dedication to her patients while lamenting the society that made her feel unable to seek help for her own struggles. Public opinion polls revealed widespread support for mental health initiatives and reduced stigma surrounding depression treatment. Emily's story resonated particularly with other professional women who faced similar pressures to maintain perfect facades while dealing with personal challenges. Support groups formed for families affected by professional suicide, providing resources and understanding for those grieving similar losses. The case influenced Swedish mental health policy, leading to increased funding for suicide prevention programs and public awareness campaigns. Emily became an unintended symbol of the hidden costs of societal expectations and the importance of mental health support systems. Her story continued to appear in media discussions about physician wellness and suicide prevention for decades after the case's resolution. Lars Eriksson, the diver who discovered Emily's car, became an advocate for underwater search and recovery operations. His accidental discovery led to systematic searches of other Swedish lakes where missing persons cases remained unsolved. Several additional vehicles and remains were found in subsequent years, providing closure for other grieving families. Lars worked with police departments to develop better protocols for underwater investigations, sharing his expertise to improve search techniques. He established a volunteer diving group specializing in assisting law enforcement with underwater recoveries, ensuring that other families wouldn't wait decades for answers. The diving community embraced this mission, with many recreational divers volunteering their time and equipment for search operations. Lars's discovery of Emily's car demonstrated how citizen involvement could solve cold cases and bring resolution to long-standing mysteries. His dedication to helping others find closure became part of Emily's legacy, showing how one person's tragedy could inspire positive action in unexpected ways. Emily Brock's case taught law enforcement valuable lessons about missing person investigations and the complexity of human behavior. Traditional search methods focusing on logical routes and destinations proved inadequate when dealing with individuals in psychological crisis. The case emphasized the importance of examining missing persons' mental health history and recognizing that even high-functioning individuals could be planning suicide. Police departments began incorporating psychological consultants into major missing person investigations, seeking insights into behavioral patterns that might guide search efforts. Emily's methodical planning and ability to conceal her intentions challenged assumptions about how suicidal individuals behave before their deaths. The case highlighted the need for better coordination between mental health professionals and law enforcement when dealing with at-risk individuals. Training programs for police officers began, including modules on recognizing depression symptoms and understanding suicide risk factors. Emily's story became a teaching tool, demonstrating that missing persons cases often have psychological rather than criminal explanations. The 2-decade gap between Emily's disappearance and the discovery of her car highlighted how water can preserve evidence while hiding it from investigators. Advances in underwater search technology during the 1980s and 1990s might have found Emily's car years earlier, but budget constraints and case prioritization limited their use on cold cases. The lengthy timeline also demonstrated how witness memories could remain remarkably accurate across decades, as Eric Sundberg's testimony about seeing Emily at the lake proved crucial to understanding her final hours. Cold case investigators learned from Emily's case that underwater searches should be considered even in cases where no water connection seemed obvious. The extended mystery period allowed myths and theories to develop around Emily's disappearance, showing how public fascination with unsolved cases could both help and hinder investigations. Media coverage during the intervening years kept Emily's case in public consciousness, eventually leading to the tip that helped identify her car when it was discovered. The case proved that patience and persistence in cold case investigations could eventually yield results. Mental health professionals used Emily's case to study how high-functioning depression manifests in healthcare workers. Her ability to maintain excellent patient care while privately planning suicide challenged common understanding of severe depression symptoms. Psychiatrists noted Emily's pattern of increased work dedication and patient interaction as potential warning signs that depression sufferers might display when preparing for suicide. The case contributed to research on physician suicide, revealing how medical training and professional culture could discourage help-seeking behavior among doctors experiencing mental health crises. Emily's secret self-medication and diagnosis highlighted the dangers of physicians attempting to treat their own psychological conditions without professional support. Her detailed documentation of her symptoms provided researchers with unusual insight into the progression of untreated depression in a medical professional. The case influenced development of intervention programs specifically designed for healthcare workers, recognizing their unique challenges in seeking mental health treatment. Emily's story became part of psychiatric education, teaching future mental health professionals to recognize depression in high-achieving individuals who might not fit typical patient profiles. The contrast between 1973's investigation methods and 1994's recovery capabilities highlighted rapid technological advancement in law enforcement. When Emily first disappeared, police relied on manual searches, paper records, and basic communication systems. By 1994, underwater cameras, sonar equipment, and computerized databases had revolutionized missing person investigations. The 21-year gap showcased how technological limitations had initially prevented Emily's discovery, while later innovations made the recovery possible. Modern GPS systems and satellite imagery would have allowed investigators to map Emily's possible routes more accurately in 1973. Advanced underwater search equipment available in the 1990s could have located the submerged car much earlier if applied systematically. The case demonstrated how cold cases could benefit from periodic review using new technologies and methods. Police departments began establishing protocols for regularly re-examining unsolved cases with updated equipment and techniques. Emily's case became an example of how patience and technological progress could eventually solve seemingly impossible mysteries. The evolution from manual to digital investigation methods was perfectly illustrated by comparing the original search efforts with the eventual underwater recovery. Emily's story created lasting changes that extended far beyond her individual case. Medical schools across Scandinavia implemented mental health screening programs for students and faculty members. Hospital administrators developed policies requiring regular wellness checks for staff showing signs of stress or overwork. Emily's former patients, now adults, often credited her memory with inspiring their own compassionate approach to helping others. Several became healthcare workers themselves, motivated by Emily's example to serve patients with kindness and dedication. The case influenced Swedish legislation regarding physician mental health support, mandating that medical facilities provide confidential counseling services. Research grants were established to study healthcare worker suicide prevention, leading to breakthrough treatments and intervention strategies. Emily's Aunt Margareta's Scholarship Fund helped dozens of students pursue mental health careers, multiplying Emily's impact across generations. The diving community's adoption of search and rescue missions led to numerous other case resolutions. Media coverage of Emily's case reduced stigma surrounding mental health discussions throughout Sweden. Her unintended legacy created positive changes that saved countless lives and improved mental health care for millions. Despite solving the mystery of Emily's disappearance, some questions about her final hours remained unanswered. Investigators never determined exactly how Emily had managed to submerge her car so precisely without leaving obvious evidence of the method she used. The car's position on the lake bottom suggested careful placement rather than accidental submersion, but the mechanics of Emily's final actions remained unclear. Eric Sundberg's testimony placed Emily at the lake during daylight hours, but the exact timing of her death and the car's submersion couldn't be established definitively. Some investigators wondered if Emily had second thoughts during her final moments, possibly attempting to retrieve something from her car before succumbing to the cold water. The absence of any final note or message at the lake scene left questions about Emily's emotional state during her last hours. Her medical knowledge would have informed her about hypothermia's effects, but whether she experienced fear, peace, or regret remained unknown. These lingering mysteries served as reminders of the private nature of individual suffering and the limits of even thorough investigations. Emily's final thoughts and feelings would remain forever sealed beneath Lake Melloran's dark waters. In 1995, a year after Emily's car was discovered, her former patients and colleagues established a memorial garden at Stockholm's Karolinska Hospital. The small, peaceful space featured native Swedish plants and a simple stone bench with a plaque honoring Emily's dedication to healing others. The memorial became a place for quiet reflection on the challenges faced by healthcare workers and the importance of supporting those who dedicate their lives to caring for others. Medical students often visited the garden during stressful periods, finding inspiration in Emily's memory while learning about the importance of seeking help when needed. The plaque's inscription read simply, "Dr. Emily Brock, who healed others with compassion and reminded us to heal ourselves with understanding." Annual memorial services brought together Emily's former patients, now elderly, who shared stories of how her care had impacted their lives. The garden's design emphasized renewal and growth, symbolizing how Emily's tragedy had led to positive changes in medical culture and mental health awareness. Flowers bloomed each spring, representing the continuing influence of Emily's compassion on new generations of healthcare providers. Swedish public television produced a documentary about Emily's case in 1996, featuring interviews with investigators, colleagues, and patients who remembered her. The program balanced respect for Emily's memory with honest discussion of the warning signs that had been missed. Dr. Henrik Larsson, Emily's psychiatrist, participated in the documentary to educate viewers about depression symptoms and the importance of seeking professional help. The film showed Lake Melloran as it appeared during different seasons, emphasizing both its natural beauty and its tragic significance in Emily's story. Former Detective Gunnar Holmberg walked viewers through the investigation's key moments, explaining how assumptions and limited technology had initially prevented the case's resolution. The documentary avoided sensationalizing Emily's death, instead focusing on lessons learned and positive changes inspired by her case. International mental health organizations used the film as an educational tool, translating it into multiple languages for worldwide distribution. The program won several awards for its sensitive treatment of suicide and mental health issues. Its impact extended far beyond Sweden, influencing mental health awareness campaigns and physician suicide prevention programs globally. In 1997, researchers at the Karolinska Institute launched a comprehensive study of physician suicide using Emily's case as a starting point. The 5-year research project examined patterns in healthcare worker mental health, identifying risk factors and developing early intervention strategies. Emily's detailed medical records and letters provided researchers with unprecedented insight into the progression of depression in a high-functioning medical professional. The study revealed that physicians experiencing depression often continued providing excellent patient care while privately planning their deaths, making intervention particularly challenging. Researchers developed screening tools specifically designed to identify at-risk healthcare workers who might not seek help voluntarily. The study's findings influenced medical education curricula worldwide, leading to mandatory wellness programs and mental health training for medical students. Emily's case became a central example in research literature about physician suicide, cited in hundreds of academic papers and policy documents. The study's recommendations led to systemic changes in hospital management, medical licensing requirements, and professional support systems. Emily's contribution to understanding physician mental health continued decades after her death, helping prevent similar tragedies among healthcare workers globally. Following the documentary's broadcast, hundreds of Emily's former patients wrote letters sharing memories of her care and expressing grief over her hidden suffering. These letters, preserved in hospital archives, revealed the profound impact Emily had made on individual lives through her compassionate medical practice. Many writers described specific moments when Emily's kindness had provided comfort during frightening medical situations or difficult life circumstances. Elderly patients remembered how Emily had visited their homes during harsh winter weather, ensuring they received necessary care despite transportation difficulties. Parents wrote about Emily's special ability to calm frightened children during medical procedures, often spending extra time explaining treatments and offering reassurance. Several patients credited Emily with saving their lives through early diagnosis of serious conditions, noting her careful attention to symptoms that other doctors might have dismissed. The letters painted a picture of a physician who viewed medicine as a calling rather than just a profession, consistently going beyond required duties to serve her patients' needs. Reading these testimonials, Emily's family and colleagues found some comfort in knowing that her professional legacy had brought healing and hope to so many lives, even as she struggled privately. Emily's case led to the establishment of Sweden's first dedicated cold case unit in 1995, specifically designed to review unsolved disappearances and deaths using modern investigative techniques. Detective Inspector Gunnar Holmberg was chosen to lead the unit, bringing his expertise from Emily's case to other mysterious disappearances. The unit's first major success came from re-examining the Lake Mälaren area with advanced sonar equipment, leading to the discovery of 3 additional submerged vehicles from decades-old cases. Each discovery brought closure to families who had waited years for answers about missing loved ones. The unit developed protocols for systematic underwater searches of bodies of water near unsolved disappearance sites. Emily's case served as a template for understanding how missing persons might deliberately conceal their deaths to spare others trauma. The unit's work revealed that several other missing individuals had likely died by suicide in remote locations, challenging assumptions about their fates. Within 5 years, the cold case unit had resolved over 30 previously unsolved disappearances, many involving similar patterns to Emily's case. The unit's success led other countries to establish similar programs, spreading the investigative techniques developed through Emily's case worldwide. Dr. Anna Chen, a young physician who learned about Emily's story during medical school, opened a family practice in Emily's former neighborhood in 2000. Sarah deliberately chose the location to honor Emily's memory and continue serving the community where Emily had dedicated her career. Many of Sarah's early patients were elderly residents who remembered Emily fondly and shared stories about her exceptional care. Sarah implemented wellness programs inspired by Emily's case, including regular mental health screenings for her staff and open discussions about work-life balance. The practice featured a small display honoring Emily's memory, including photos donated by former patients and a copy of Emily's medical diploma recovered from her apartment. Sarah often reflected on Emily's example when facing difficult cases, asking herself how Emily might have approached challenging patient situations. The practice became known throughout Stockholm for its compassionate care and attention to both physical and emotional health needs. Sarah established support groups for medical professionals struggling with stress and depression, creating the safe space for help-seeking that Emily had never found. Through Sarah's work, Emily's healing legacy continued in the same neighborhoods where she had once served patients with such dedication. Each December 15th, Lake Mälaren became a site of quiet remembrance for those touched by Emily's story. Mental health advocates, former patients, and medical professionals gathered for brief memorial services that honored Emily's memory while promoting suicide prevention awareness. These annual gatherings avoided dwelling on tragedy, instead focusing on the positive changes inspired by Emily's case and the lives saved through improved mental health support. Speakers included physicians who credited Emily's story with encouraging them to seek help during their own dark periods. Family members of other physician suicide victims found comfort in connecting with others who understood their unique grief. The memorial services featured readings of letters from Emily's patients, sharing how her compassionate care had influenced their lives decades later. Local mental health organizations used the anniversary events to distribute resources and information about support services available to healthcare workers. The gatherings demonstrated how tragedy could inspire community action and prevent similar losses. As years passed, the memorials evolved from mourning Emily's death to celebrating her life and the ongoing impact of lessons learned from her case. The December 15th remembrances became symbols of hope and healing rather than just occasions for grief. Emily's story transcended Swedish borders, becoming an international case study in physician mental health and suicide prevention. Medical journals published articles analyzing her case, leading to policy changes in healthcare systems worldwide. The World Health Organization referenced Emily's case in developing guidelines for physician wellness programs and suicide prevention strategies. Medical schools across Europe and North America incorporated Emily's story into curricula addressing healthcare worker mental health. Her case influenced the development of confidential reporting systems that allowed medical professionals to seek help without fear of career consequences. International medical conferences featured sessions on the Emily Brock effect, discussing how her case had changed understanding of physician depression and suicide risk. Research funding increased dramatically for studies examining mental health issues among healthcare workers, often citing Emily's case as justification for the need. Professional medical organizations worldwide established peer support programs inspired by lessons learned from Emily's tragedy. Her story contributed to a global cultural shift within medicine, making mental health discussions more acceptable and reducing stigma around seeking psychological help. Emily's unintended legacy reached millions of healthcare workers internationally, potentially preventing countless similar tragedies through increased awareness and support. As investigators prepared to permanently close Emily's file, they reflected on the profound questions her case raised about human suffering, professional pressure, and the hidden costs of caring for others. Emily's ability to heal and comfort patients while privately planning her own death challenged basic assumptions about recognizing depression and suicide risk. Her case highlighted the paradox of healthcare workers who dedicate their lives to preserving life while struggling with their own will to live. The contrast between Emily's public persona and private anguish raised uncomfortable questions about societal expectations and the pressure to maintain perfect facades. Mental health professionals continued debating whether Emily's case represented an extreme example of high-functioning depression or revealed common patterns that simply weren't being recognized in other cases. The question of whether Emily could have been saved with different intervention approaches remained a source of ongoing discussion and research. Her case prompted examination of how medical training and culture might inadvertently contribute to mental health crises among healthcare providers. The mystery of Emily's exact final moments served as a reminder that some aspects of human experience remain forever private, beyond the reach of even thorough investigation. Today, more than 30 years after Emily Brock's disappearance, her impact continues to resonate throughout the medical community and beyond. The Emily Brock Foundation, established by her former patients, has funded mental health research and support programs that have helped thousands of healthcare workers. Her story remains required reading in medical schools, teaching new generations of physicians about the importance of self-care and seeking help. The protocols developed during her case investigation have been adopted by law enforcement agencies worldwide, improving methods for solving cold cases and understanding missing person patterns. Lake Melleran has been transformed from a site of tragedy into a symbol of hope, featuring walking paths with mental health resource information and crisis intervention phones. Emily's former clinic building now houses a mental health center that provides free counseling services to medical professionals, ensuring that her workspace continues to heal those in need. The changes inspired by her case have undoubtedly prevented numerous physician suicides, multiplying Emily's healing legacy far beyond her original practice. Perhaps most importantly, Emily's story opened conversations about mental health that had been silenced by shame and stigma for generations. In choosing to end her pain in Lake Melleran's depths, Emily unknowingly began a ripple effect of compassion and understanding that continues to save lives today. The question remains, how many others like Dr. Emily Brock's are struggling in silence right now, and will we recognize them in time? This case exemplifies how missing person investigations can evolve from unsolved mysteries into profound lessons about human suffering. Her disappearance story demonstrates that even the most thorough cold case files may hold secrets beneath the surface. This vanishing without a trace reminds us that true crime stories often reveal deeper truths about mental health struggles hidden behind professional facades. Real-life mysteries like Emily's underwater discovery show how missing persons cases can remain unsolved for decades before shocking revelations emerge. Such suspenseful missing person stories highlight the importance of recognizing warning signs in our communities. When divers found what no one believed possible, it transformed a long-term missing person mystery into a catalyst for change. These mysterious disappearances continue to fascinate audiences because they reflect genuine human experiences of isolation and despair. Emily's case proves that behind every vanished person lies a complex story deserving compassion rather than judgment.